Thank you guys. My name is Asad Ali. I'm part of Compuware APM tool, and the tool that I have kind of worked a lot is the Dynatrace tool, which is the Compuware APM, one of the tools within the suite. And I've been with Dynatrace Compuware for 3 years now, and for the first 2 years, I spent a lot of time doing post-sales, a lot of consulting with load testing tool teams, performance teams, really integrating their load testing tool with Dynatrace. And one thing that I want to do is talk about kind of what I have seen and what I've learned and the best practices that I have kind of worked with the different teams and kind of bring it to the audience here. What I want to do is go about like 5, 6 different things that I want to talk about, and I have some data I want to show about that live demo also into this. And my topic of discussion today is going a little bit into the black box testing, but then focus into white box testing with Dynatrace. Then talk about end-to-end transactions testing. Why is it that important? Go into details later on into when you run your load test, how do you compare now and how Dynatrace helps you with that. Then also you get the data, how do you share currently and what Dynatrace provides in that area. And then integration with load testing tool, how Dynatrace can help with the existing tools. But my focus today a little bit is on Selenium, and for one particular reason I'll talk about that and then go into the live demo. Stop me if you have questions. If I have something that I will cover in the future slides or the coming slides, I'll definitely let you know. Yeah. So looking at the first one, which is the black box testing and the white box testing, one thing that I'm sure as you guys have spent time looking into testing, you run your load test through load runner or JUnit, JMeter. Basically what you're doing there is you're running your transactions through your load testing tool into an application set. And in your application set or application that you're testing has, of course, different tiers. But with the black box testing, what you generally get, you put the load, and what you get is an output, something like this, where you get your error rates, your statistical information in a matrix form like this. And so you see error rates, your throughput, that kind of information the load testing tool provides you. What it does not provide, some of the tools may help you say, okay, this is the tier in my application that is slowing things down. But why, where exactly, that information you don't get. So, and also as I was talking to one customer of ours this morning, and what they do is they do the black box testing and then they send the data over to the team overseas. And the team overseas get this data in Excel format. They spend hours, if not days, going through the data to find out whether the load test was successful or not. So what happens is that typically what happens is that you do your load test, you run your test, you get the results, then you send it over to the development team, they look at it, they make an educated guess what could have gone wrong, send the data code back to you, you go through the iterations, and you go through multiple iterations, the code is refined, but you still have to go through many iterations to come to a place where you realize, okay, now I'm understanding over and over again when I did the load test, now the response time is coming close to what I expect in my load testing tool. But a lot of time you go back and forth working with the development team and your team to find out how to improve the performance, and you made some educated guess to come to a problem analysis. So basically you're doing multiple tests, multiple iterations to come to that conclusions, and then at the end of that you get some results that are absolutely meeting your SLAs before you push it to production. The other thing is that as you add load in a black box testing, you are putting different size of loads. You can say, let me start with a smaller load, then you increase the load, and then you take it to the maximum value you can. And you get to see, yes, as I'm increasing my load, my performance response time is also increasing. You get that kind of relationship, but what you don't know here is what tier or which layer or which API, which kind of set of code is really increasing in response time as you are increasing load. So still this is a black box. You can definitely extrapolate from here saying that yes, this looks like an even curve, and my hope is that when I put this in production where the load is really 5 times or 3 times my existing load or my pre-prod load, that it should be able to sufficiently able to handle the load. You're making a guess estimate here that it should be able to take the load, but what layer is increasing, you don't get that. Now switching from the black box testing and going into a little bit of white box testing, and then the reason I'm using white box testing word here is that with Dynatrace, when you integrate Dynatrace with your load testing tool, you really get to get very deep or very high up to you about how much data you want to look at to find what's going on in your load test as you increase your load. So for example, here you are getting virtual users, and these users are putting load. The application remains the same, but with Dynatrace now you get to see which layer, is it .NET, Java, C++, or your mainframe, whatever application, whichever layer the transaction is sitting, you get to see that. You get to see that when I run for a particular set of user or with a certain user, my transaction flows in a different way than if I have a super user, if I have a non-super user, how my transaction is behaving. Because what we are doing here is that we are giving you, we track every transaction, the business transaction or virtual, every transaction that your virtual user is hitting the application, we are capturing that. For example, if an e-commerce site, you want to say how many searches will happen. If you do a search, if you do 10,000, if you put a load of 10,000 users, virtual users, and they're doing searches for different items, Dynatrace will capture every individual transaction, the 10,000 transactions that you're hitting. So the advantage of doing that is that I'm no longer looking at sampling, I'm not doing any averaging. I'm capturing every load, every transaction that you're hitting. Plus, I get individual contextual data for every transaction. Which method, which is my data access layer that is taking time, or is it my business logic layer, or this particular package in my development, in my application that is increasing in response time as I increase the load. Now, when I work with different teams around different customers, I've seen 2-3 different flavors of the team. People who are really doing testing and then sending the information over to the development team to say, figure it out. But I have seen a trend, a change in trend where the web load testing team is no longer just a load testing team. They're responsible to really figure out what's going on and provide very valuable information to the development team so that the life cycle of your product, you hit the market early on. So with this, I'm getting individual transaction. I know which tier, which method, which SQL is executed. I'm no longer doing averaging, I'm not doing sampling. So with that, what I get is a lot more information here. For example, this is a sample dashboard from Dynatrace where this is my demo app that I ran this particular test, is an online travel booking. So when I ran this test through Selenium, I was able to say, I'm doing a booking of a journey, I'm going to the different website, different web pages, I'm doing bookings, I'm looking for different rates. I get that view, plus I get how many times I have done that. But whenever I click on any of that, I get contextual information about how my response time is for that particular activity that I did. But not only that, I get to see which tier is spending time, which tier is taking the most amount of time for that particular, in this case when I did booking review, most of my time, a lot amount of my time went into this Java layer. This one was very lightweight, my database was not that heavily used. Plus, I know that I have 3,000 times I have done booking review with my load testing tool. I can now go from here to look at individual those 3,000 transactions that I did. So it's up to you whether you want to go at a little bit at a higher level to say this is good information data, I can live with this gives me a lot of information. But for a lot of web testing tool teams, that what they're doing is they're not stopping here. They want to know when it took average of 300 or 300 milliseconds or 600 milliseconds, which is about the SLAs. Show me why, which transaction, which method, what is causing that to increase in response time. So I'm getting relevant data, is no longer averaging and sampling. Other thing is that with that information available, now I can see as I'm increasing load, which tier or which part of my application is increasing in response time. So in this particular case, I can see that as I'm increasing load, my presentation layer and other data access layers, they're pretty constant, they're not looking bad, but my business logic layer is increasing in response time. That means I can now make a very educated guess whether if I put this in production, if I promote this to production, will my existing hardware and the load that I get in production, will it be able to take the load or not? If this was database access layer, for example, which is increasing in time, I was talking to one prospect yesterday, they do a lot of testing. And when I integrate Dynatrace in their testing tool, we saw that the database queries were taking huge amount of time, like 15 seconds in certain cases. And when I showed that to them, they did not have the information about how much is my CPU utilized on the database server. They didn't have that information. And when we pulled that information into Dynatrace, I could say the CPU was pegged at 100%. So the fact that the data access layer was increasing so much is no surprise because the CPU was pegging at 100%. So this information helps you not only to say that I need to improve my queries or I need to increase the concurrency on my database or I need to add a little bit more hardware in my load testing tool, as well as when I'm promoting this code into production, am I ready to take the 3 times or 5x load that the production environment will add to my application. This is another view in Dynatrace. Same like when I ran my load test, I'm getting to see exactly which tier is taking time as I did my load. So I get exactly, so I have front end, I have a Java front end, I have Java back end in my application, and I get to see that my credit card, which is one of the tier, is increasing time. So I can now go from here to say, show me that method which is having a synchronization problem where all different threads are coming for me trying to reach out to one method, and that method is synchronized or all the threads are blocked because one thread is busy using that method. I can also say, what are my different APIs? Is it my Java servlet? Is my ASP? Is my ATO.NET? Is my JDBC? Which tier? This is my application tier, basically. Is it my presentation layer that is taking time? Data layer, which is taking time? So I get both the views in one place in Dynatrace to quickly come up to the conclusion whether my load or my application is strong enough to sustain the load or not. This is, I added this into this just to kind of show you that in Dynatrace, as I mentioned, we are capturing every transaction. So if you are the kind of people who are saying, I'm not only doing web load testing, but I want to know what data is being captured, which method, which transaction is taking time. This is an example. You can go to this level also. You can stay at this level. If you are more curious, if you have more responsibility to look more deeper, you can say, this is one transaction. This is one transaction, and these are all the methods that are captured by Dynatrace automatically for you out of the box. And here, I know that out of the 3 seconds here, 2 seconds are taken in this method alone. So this helps me now if you are doing more really white box testing and you're doing more than just load testing, you have all the data at your fingertips. So it's up your choice how detailed or how high level you want to stay. So basically what With data trace, the intention with the data we are capturing, what we are doing is we are skipping over all these iterations. And the reason is because when you do a load test, when you put add load into your application, all the transactions are captured, all the contextual information is available to you. So it's no longer that when you send this data over to the development team, that they are making a guess on what could have gone wrong. All the information for what has gone wrong in performance-wise is captured. They can quickly look at that and quickly fix the code. So the idea is that you do a test run, you send the data, you fix the code, and you do one more test run and you're done. You don't have to go through iteration because there's no guesswork here. The other thing is end-to-end transaction testing, and this is the reason I kind of talk about here is that, and that's why I talk about Selenium. We have devices, we have browsers, we have our especially e-commerce, banking, those kind of industry, or any web application for that matter. It's no longer that you have one browser and that one end users are using. You're using all different kind of devices. So if you have a mobile app, you want to test in your load testing your mobile app all the way to your different tiers, all the ways to your database, all the way to your mainframe to make sure that you get visibility into that. So this is an example where I have, the other reason this is an example of that is where I am showing you, we are capturing all your transaction from end to end. So I have a request that is starting from a browser, it's hitting different layers, it's hitting my database layer. I get this information out of the box and I know which tier is taking time. Of course, I can go more and find out which method. The reason is that with the browser, a lot of customers I know who are using a lot of web application used to do a lot of testing starting from this layer. They use load runner, they would use JMeter, JUnit. Those are great tools, don't get me wrong there. But these tools miss out one of the more important component also, which is the browser. And the reason is the browser is now you have a lot of AJAX call, you have Web 2.0 applications running in your environment, and the browser is doing stuff. It's no longer just a lightweight so-called client. It's doing stuff in its own layer. Plus, you have these layers where so many layers in your distributed application, you want to know every layer plays an important part in the response time. You want to know whether if you miss out a layer in your load testing, or if you don't look at the end-to-end, if one layer is taking time and if you don't get visibility into that, you will not be able to find what is causing the performance problem in your environment. Other thing is that these tiers are talking to each other. The .NET to Java, Java to Java, all those Java to mainframe, JMS, all the enterprise thing, they're talking to each other. If you're doing a lot of iterations, if you're doing a lot of remoting calls, in your test performance, if you don't get visibility into that, it goes into production, and no longer like this tier in your development or in your load testing environment may be in the same data center. But if you don't pay attention to this part, it goes into production, this may be sitting in Boston, this could be sitting in San Francisco. And if you have 15 times calls between each tier for each transaction, now during your load testing tool, whatever was taking few seconds will take minutes now in production. And we have seen that case, really that case at a customer site. So knowing this, what's going on, how many calls am I making between tiers, and how much time is spent in the tier, inter-tier communication is also important as part of load testing. The other thing that, as I mentioned before, is how do you compare results? You ran a version 1 of your tool, you got some data, you were happy with it, you promoted it to production. Now the developers have made an enhancement to the code, the version 2 comes out. How do you know whether the new module that is added, or new functionality or fix that has been done, how do you know that has improved the performance or it has gone worse? A lot of customers I know pull the data from version 1, statistical data, put into Excel, run through a lot of Excel code, come up with a result, with a summarized data. They do the same thing with version 2. It is very time consuming, it is a little bit error prone also. And also you want to know which tier has, if I improve my OR mapping layer, for example, in my version 2, did it have a ripple effect and did it have a worse impact on any other tier? You want to know that as you get ready for version 2. You want to know which package somebody added a code that is now causing my performance to go down. You want to know which package that is, or which team should I send the data back to say that fix this, because whatever code changes that you have done is making things worse instead of making them better. So, and also you want to, you also want to know that is version 2 is as optimized as version 1 to take heavy load. Is it behaving? Is there a synchronization problem? Is there a locking problem? You want to know that. So you want to compare results of version 1 with version 2. And with Dynatrace provides that ability where if you are running any load test, you can ask Dynatrace to record all your transactions into a file. Then you run your load test for version 2 whenever you're ready, 3 months, 2 months, or 1 month later. Record all those transactions into different file. And then you can ask Dynatrace to do a comparison for you automatically. This is an example of that where I ran 2 tests on the same version of the code, but I ran 2 tests on a different environment. I can compare now that the colors are not that visible right now, but Dynatrace automatically show you differences in time and the count in red and green. If the version 2, for example, is looking worse, in this case the credit card check, so that code has improved in time. Average time has improved, but the count is more. That's why when I ran 10,000 transactions through it, the total sum of credit card is looking worse. So that means the average time is looking good, but my sum is bad. That means I'm making a lot more call to the credit card with the same load test. Here I can compare my SQLs, where my SQL queries have been optimized. Is my database indexes, is the changes in the query, is it looking better or worse? So in this case, this particular select statement, for example, is taking longer time in version 2, which it is shown in red, is a little bit difficult to read. I can now say that I can also compare my web service call, my web request call. I can get all the information. For example, here I can say that the contact page, my website, is performing better now. It is, the count has, the average response time, the total time for that one is much more lower than the version 1. So I can look at the data at a very granular level, at a high summarized level here. So this is at the summary level for each kind of activity that you're doing. Here I'm looking at a very granular level where I'm comparing different SQLs. I can compare your packages, your APIs, I can compare database, I can compare web services. There are a lot more other things that I can compare in Dynatrace. And the intention is for me to get a report like this. When you integrate Dynatrace with any of your load testing tool, you are not only putting the load into the application, you can ask a load testing tool to convert this particular report or dashboard into a report, and then email it to you after the load test is done. So you can automate the whole process. I was talking to LinkedIn last week. They're using our tool. So they do a lot of load testing. They want to automate everything. Their intention is not to have people looking at the response time. They want to get the data, run the report, collect the data automatically, do comparison behind with the scripts, and then decide whether to promote it or not. So they are getting this kind of data automatically out of Dynatrace and running it, comparing it. If it passes through their checkpoint, then the code is promoted, otherwise it is not. And it is all automatic. It's not so much nobody looking at this per se. But the fact that they can generate a report like this is very, very valuable for them. So again, this is more same thing. I'm just going to expand it to show you that There are different things. Here I can say credit card has gone worse, my remoting is worse, but some of the other services have improved. A quick view of how my performance between version 1 and version 2 is. Same thing for database. I can see which SQL is looking bad. I can capture the bind values, compare with the bind values. The other thing that I mentioned before and I've seen over and over again is I do a load test. I generate the statistical information, and what I pass on to my developers is my log files for my test, my CPU metrics, my metrics for my host machine. I may provide some kind of you may provide some kind of a scenarios like I did a search with this user and all that, and hence, but the performance was bad for that scenario. This is what you generally tend to send. But what the developer then is struggling with is how can I reproduce this? That's why when I showed you iterations, they make some changes, send it over to you to see whether it makes sense or not. So you go through this iteration where you're passing on back and forth this information to the developers and then trying to use this information to make an educated guess from the data they have. This data is tricky because if you're looking at log files and your application is even in the web load testing environment, if your application is distributed in different data centers, your log files that may have different timestamp on it, you are trying to correlate them to try to make sense whether what could have gone wrong. It is very time consuming here and error prone. Internal trace has the beauty where you can say I am running a load test from 9 AM to 10 AM or I ran 10,000 transactions. You can say record that data into a file, send the file over to the development team. They get every transaction, all the contextual information to find the root cause why it took time. They don't have to make any guess estimate. They have all the data all the way to the method level to the SQL statement level to find the root cause. So I can just say, for example, I can say, oh, purchase is my purchase activity of the online travel is taking more than I want it to be. This is looking worse. Right click on it, just say export, and that is will open up option for you to say where do you want to store this data, and all these 3,173 transactions that you did using your tool get stored into this file, send the file over to the team. The development team can open this file remotely. They don't have to connect it to your environment at all. Even if they are flying, they can just pull this data into their laptop and analyze offline. The last part I wanted to, before I show the little bit of the live demo, is integration with load testing tool. We provide integration with all the popular tools: LoadRunner, JUnit, JMeter, Selenium, Ant, and Maven, of course, and also a few other tools. And the intention is that you guys have put a lot of effort into building your load testing scripts. You're using that. Our intention here is to integrate with your existing tool to give you more visibility and not make it complex for you, actually make it easier for you to look at the data, figure out what's going on, and communicate with the development team. And one of the reasons I'm focusing on Selenium is because in my experience, and I've seen Selenium as one of the few tools that really launches a browser for you as you're doing load testing. Silk Performer has its own GUI. It is a minimized version of a browser. LoadRunner, most of the customers that I see using LoadRunner is a great tool, but doesn't launch a browser. So what you don't get to see then is you get to see all your applications from Java, .NET and all that, but what you don't get to see is how's my browser behaving, how's my JavaScript, how's my rendering, how's my caching. That data I don't get to see. That's why I chose Selenium today to talk about it, because in my diagram here, if I can go back, is I want to look at the data from this to all the way to all the tiers. If I had mainframe in my thing, I want to put data into mainframe to look at that. If I'm using JMS, if I'm using MQ, I want that. I don't want to miss any of my data. Questions, thoughts, things that you guys are doing that I may have not covered, or before I go into the light demo? Yes.
So a couple of areas. One layer is the web server itself. What can you tell us about the web server performance?
We have in my diagram here, when I ran my load test, I did not run a web server. We have agents for web servers also. I can show you what your 400 errors, I can show you all your performance of the web server, because we can get a lot of web servers like IIS and Apache exposes their metrics data through an API. We can tap into that and give you the performance of web server. We can show you that when you're making a call into your web server and the call came in, how much time was spent in the web server and how much time was spent in this backside here. So I can show you whether time was spent a lot in the web server. If there was a lot of time spent, I can use the metrics data available from the web server to show you where potential problem could be. Is it running out of connection pools? Is it running out of other resources within its own code?
Can you do this with Nginx?
Nginx. Is that, I've not come across that web server.
You will.
Okay, well, okay.
Okay, my other question is, say my application is in PHP.
Yes.
Do you instrument the PHP code somehow?
We are doing that in a release that is coming on soon, that we'll be able to do instrumentation of PHP also.
But that's the requirement, is it? You have to add something to the code in order to pull out all the statistics that you want.
Well, I know for at least for the Java and .NET layer, you don't have to do anything. That is automatically captures it because it's managed code. Here, and I'm showing you all this data, I just add a command, like in case of Java layer, for example, I add a command line option at my startup, and it automatically starts capturing all the methods, all the database calls automatically. For PHP, I have to see whether it is automatic or not. PHP, I believe, is not like a managed code like Java and .NET.
Well, it is interpreted, so maybe you can catch it at the interpreter level. I don't know.
It would likely to be possible to put some type of extension in extension engine.
Flexibug already does that. Yeah, Flexibug already does facing the
Okay, because I know that we are coming soon with the PHP thing, because PHP, you're absolutely right, is very commonly used.
Sure.
Apart from JSPs and Java and .NET part, PHP and Ruby and those are other popular frameworks.
Yes, right. I think Asad today, from the web server perspective, we can see that PHP time in the past is back. And in the spring release that's coming out, we are doing some automated configuration there. The difference is it's tagging across, right? So if you have those outliers, you can follow them. So you're not isolated in each tier and then trying to cross correlate. You can follow that full flow throughout through PHP and the web layer. So it's an SSL redirect, if it's actually a PHP, if it's on a back-end Java or .NET system, you'll see it as well.
So right now it doesn't trace the code, but it will.
Not through PHP.
Okay.
Yeah, so if the PHP is a communication layer, that tag's probably not going to persist across to that packet.
So you're going to more or less see the PHP processing time, so, 500 milliseconds.
Essentially, the code within the PHP is black.
Right, but it will still be able to pick up every call out to MySQL, every call out to an external service, but it just won't see, for example, what loop is taking the longest time, what function you call.
Exactly. So the functions and method within PHP itself right now is a kind of a solid black box area until that's can be introspective, which is Spring.
Cool. So say you had version 1, and just to keep it simple, you have one method.
Mm-hmm.
Version 2, you break that one longer method into 2 sub-methods.
Yeah.
Like, how does... I can imagine a bunch of different ways of analyzing that, but does it try to stick those two things together, or is it doing anything?
If the signature of, suppose you say method 1,
Right.
in version 1, your method 1 was a huge method, you're doing a lot of processing.
Right.
So you say, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to keep the method 1, in version 2 as a method 1, but optimize it and make it called method 2.
Right.
So when you compare in Dynatrace, you'll see method 1 and method 1 differences, but method 2 is a new method that was not in version 1, will show you how much time it is taking.
Okay.
And the way we show it to you is when we do differences, we show you, like for example, these queries came out new, so they are in gray, but I'm still showing you the data.
Yep.
So I'll show you in green, red, and gray. In gray is the part where is new or was taken out in version 2.
Could you potentially take some of those gray things and group them together, and then
Sure.
add that together? Okay.
Sure. In Dynatrace, we provide functionality what we call as business transaction. You can group things together. See, for example, if you look at this particular part of my thing, I'm grouping them together on an attribute, right? So this is all my payment. Even though I'm doing payment, I make thousands of calls to the same web request, but I'm calling it as payment, and this is contact, so I'm grouping them. So absolutely, I can do that.
And so generally, it's you could look at the name of a particular method or the name of a file, and that's the way that you can define that group, basically.
No, you can look at the argument of a method, you can look at the return value of a method, you can look at the header, request header, you can look at session attributes, you can cookies, you can group things together. So it's not only a few things, there are more many things you can find to group things. Because it makes you as a load testing tool, for you, my login means going to this page, going to this page, and doing the third page. That's my one login. When you run your load test, you can add what we call as a Dynatrace header into your request and put login, even though the pages are different, Dynatrace will say it's a login for you. Right? That's one way. Or you do load test and you said, when customer comes in, the customer goes to the home page, goes to the search page, buy something, and then complete the transaction. You can group, even though those are multiple transactions from your load test, you can group them because maybe the cookie value, some attribute is same in all of them. And you get to see how much on average did that beginning of the site to all the way to the purchase took. And then you can compare again. If you have created some kind of a business transaction like that, you can compare those two also. Questions? Yeah.
What's the overhead added? Can I run this in production?
Yes, absolutely. And generally we see an overhead of 2% on response time. And when we say 2%, as part of when we do engage with the customers, one of the things every time they said, yeah, 2%, everybody says 2%, prove it to me. And we do. We have big customers in banking, e-commerce, CS.com. Black Friday is coming up for them. They have been running Dynatrace for the last 2 years without a hiccup on their site. But with that, they're able to now see what people are buying, what's my average selling cost, or which is the top 10 products that are being sold on my site, all those things. Cars.com, they did a Super Bowl ad this year. Their site saw 1800% increase in traffic. They had the Dynatrace on all the time, 24/7.
We did measure that at less than 1% too.
Yeah.
Overall, so just phenomenal results.
How many was gathered?
They reported that back to us. They're looking at CPU, memory, and response times correlated across those, right? So if any one of those increase past that, that's going to have that number essentially. So it's response time, CPU, typically.
What is Dynatrace built on? So is it C++, Java? How does it run?
So this particular part, which is I'm showing you a screenshot, which is a Dynatrace client, it is built on top of Eclipse. It has Eclipse features in it, but it has some external libraries also. When I show you this diagram here, that what we are doing here is we are putting an agent into each of your layer, and that agent starts in your JVM or your .NET. That agent is a very lightweight, even though it's called agent, I call it like a very lightweight library, capturing information, sending it over to the centralized database server. So that's why when I talk about 1% or 2% overhead, the reason is because these agents are really not doing anything, no processing at all. And they send it to one centralized database server, which is written in Java.
So what would happen if, for example, Dynatrace's servers went down?
This agent will say, oh, this agent server is down. They'll try for some time and then say, okay, they're not going to cause your JVM.NET to shut down or add any extra overhead at all. Actually, when they realize after a certain time the data server is down, agents in themselves will kind of go into a shutdown mode where they're not really doing anything because the server is not there. And the idea is again is built from the architecture that the overhead should be low and it should have an almost negligible impact on the application. If you are kind of adding a lot of overhead, your numbers are skewed and it doesn't make sense to use the tool at all. So what I did is, this is my Dynatrace client. I ran a load test again, as I mentioned to you yesterday, same screenshot what I showed, but this is my Dynatrace client. What I did is, I ran 2 tests yesterday. And as I mentioned to you, I can capture all that data into separate files. For example, this is my load test 1, this is load test 2. So this is load test 1, load test 2. What load test 1 is my half an hour worth of load test in it. Load test 2 has another half an hour. And using those 2 load tests, I can say, show me the diff between them. And this is a dashboard. I rename it whatever I need. But here I put my API breakdown, one of the showing which layers are increasing in time. My database call, difference in different databases. I'm getting my web service, I'm getting my web request. These are the user-friendly names that I've given. In Dynatrace also we provide a dashboard out of the box. Yeah, that's fine. Called Analyze Load Test. Here I can say I ran a load test and I've stored all my data in the load test into a file called load test 1. Show me how it worked. I can pull that Dynatrace is now going to read that particular. Is my Dynatrace server running? And here's my load test. So basically I've taken one of these stored session, all the data that I've captured. I said, show me the load test here. Again, these are my different names, user-friendly names that I've given when I did my load test as part of my Selenium integration. So I can say my easy travel start page. When I click on it, it automatically changes, give me the relevant data only for the start page here on the right hand side. I can see how my transaction went through when I ran my test. When I go to payment, for example, how was my load and how was my response time as the load increased? How it was only hitting my front end, for example, in this case. When if I go to different parts of this, I get context sensitive information about B2B journeys, how did it respond with the increasing load. I can look at my flow of that transaction when I ran that particular users, thousands of them. I can then say, show me where the hotspots are. Tells me that my .NET front end is the one that is taking most amount of time. Are there any errors, any exceptions? Looks like I did not have anything. But Dynatrace captures all your exceptions, all your 400s. There was a question about web server. If your web server is doing 400, 500s, Dynamics will automatically capture it. Any exception that is thrown by your JVM or your .NET Dynamics will capture it, even if you do not catch it in your code. Any runtime exception Dynamics will catch it. The idea behind this is that you can see the response time. For example, when we did a POC at one of the big airlines companies, they wanted us to put in production because they are trying to find a problem in their environment for the 8 months and they could not find it. That's why they put us into their production environment, e-commerce side. Within 15 minutes, we found out what the problem is because there was one transaction that was coming in. It was making a call to a database server and the database server was down. So it would take them 10 minutes for it to time out. That is will automatically capture all the time any exception, tell you exactly what happened with all the stack trace. So when you are looking at the load test results, it's up to you whether you want to look at the data at this layer here, or do you want to go, I can say show me, that's good, but show me individual transactions. Now I'm looking at individual transactions. So it's your choice how deep or high how you want to be in. So for example, if I go in here, purchase, which is my purchase activity, this is the screenshot that I had earlier, where Dynamics is capturing all the methods, all your SQLs out of the box. And here, again, if you're working with the development team, or if you're looking at the data on your own, you can say, show me which are the methods that are taking time for this particular individual transaction. I can say, oh, these are, most of them are looking good, but these are pretty high. Select those, right click on it, export, send it to the development team. They have all the data now to figure out why it's taking time. You can look at it, they can look at it, you can share it. Other challenge that I was talking to one customer this Monday is they have meetings after the load test with 10 to 20 developers after the load test is done, because they sit together to figure out what's going on, because there are different people from different, one is from the data access layer, one is doing the business logic, other person is responsible for the presentation layer. They all sit together to figure out what's going on. Here, having this kind of data, you can say, oh, in this particular case, for example, if I go in here, let me see here, I was looking at this example here, this one. In this case, it took over 2 seconds. I can quickly go in here and say, oh, my credit card check took a long time, and my .NET remoting took most of the time for this transaction. I'm only going to talk to those 2 people. I'm not going to invite 20 people to look at a problem which is not related to their code. So now, even if I work with the development team, if I have a meeting with them, I'm no longer spending hours and hours with a big group to figure out what the problem is, because I already have all the information on my fingertips. Other thing that I did yesterday was, this is where I was mentioning earlier, I ran through Selenium, and I chose Selenium is because I wanted to know from the browser to my Java, to my web server, to Java, to .NET, and databases where the problem is. And again, when I ran I'm using the Selenium, I don't know how many people of you use Selenium. You can use the WebDriver part of Selenium, which physically launches the browser, and this is exactly what it is. So when I use the browser, Selenium, I also injected more user-friendly name. For example, if I click on this particular part, I get to see where the time was spent, how many JavaScripts were executed, what is my rendering happening. These are my screenshot of my page, of my demo app. I can go into some other page and say, these are the JavaScript. This one took 294 milliseconds. I get to see exactly how my JavaScript and how my page got rendered. In this case, the first impression time was 2 seconds. The onload time for the method got executed at 2.2 seconds. I get high-level view. I get a very granular view also. So I'm looking at the performance of the browser right now and see, oh, when this rendering happening, that is takes screenshots of pages as they get rendered. So in this particular case, this all the area that is shown in the pink here is being rendered. And as you go next page, most of it got rendered, and then something at the bottom was getting rendered. So I get this view here, and I can say, oh, this particular JavaScript took a long time, double click on it, not only I get to see the JavaScript, I get to see all the functions, all the if you modify the DOM objects, I get to see this. If I say what is this function, click on it, I get the source code on the left hand side of that function in JavaScript. Yes.
So are you getting all of that detail out of Selenium, or is this your own?
This is our database. We have agents for browser also. What Selenium is doing it for me is really launching the browser for me. If you don't launch it, I cannot look at it, right? So
your agent is what, a plugin,
yes,
an add-on
to your browser. Yes, exactly.
Any browser? Which ones do you?
We are supporting right now IE and Firefox. We are working on Chrome now.
Okay.
And different versions of IE with different versions of Firefox we support. For example, if this is my example of a Selenium run test. Here, as you can see, in my Selenium test, I'm adding this extra attribute saying that add the database agent, and this is the database server, send the data to this database server, so that when the browser gets launched by Selenium WebDriver, the database add-on is enabled and is capturing the data. So when I'm showing you this part, like for example, this is my example of a Selenium test code where I'm saying check for home page, admin home page. It opens a home page, and here I'm doing a logout, I'm doing login here, I'm passing the username, password. Selenium provides you the ability to record, and you can build use cases based on that. So this is Selenium part. Right? And this part, when I'm showing you here, is all Dynatrix. Again, I can pick up those browser information, send it over to the development team. They have all the information in there. In this particular case, for example, I just pick one of them. I can say, what are the server calls that were made on this side? For this particular page, there was JavaScript code that got downloaded. I made a call to the back end of the Java side. How long did it take? So now I can track the transaction from my browser, including JavaScript rendering into the Java layer, database layer, all that. So I get end-to-end. If I have an application that is more mobile, you can use the database mobile ADK and get the mobile from mobile to your web server to your, or mobile to your Java layer using web services, whatever you are using. So browser is one of the example here, but it could be mobile app also, native app, as well as a browser in your mobile app. So it's your choice how you want to do it.
There is a JavaScript capability too. Usually used in production for all the anonymous users out there, right? We'll automatically insert a JavaScript that download to the end users, and so you see that in production. We have customers using that in testing too, to test a wider array of browsers. There's less depth of detail than the plugin, because obviously a plugin can get a lot more data about all the DOM iterations. It's more summarized, but now you're still getting that data and can incorporate that as part of your test and go from browser to web server to the layers down below.
Okay.
Question?
Yeah, so essentially what's happening is you're making all the test cases on Selenium, you're writing your test cases in Selenium, and Dynatrace is actually getting all the data from, from the test cases. Is there any way in Dynatrace to actually write test cases?
No, so kind of yes and no. I'll say no out of the box, no. I say yes because that is a feature to extend Dynatrace, and you can what we call as plugins. You can write plugins in Java and then use the data that you have or you're getting from Dynatrace. It's tricky, but I have one customer that wanted to do that. I think last I spoke to them, what they did is they're looking at the type of data that Dynatrace is capturing, but writing it manually. They're not letting Dynatrace do that. We are focusing a lot more on the performance side. We're giving you all the insight. We integrate with the load testing tool with the expectation that the script will be there. Right? So So I can, again, having the browser and the server and other component all together, I get to see my user experience with the browser or all the way to my server link. For example, if I go in here and say, show me how the flow is, I can say that 63% of my time was in the browser for this transaction. And then a little bit 10% here, very little in the database. Now that I know that 63% is here, I also have all the information to say why. Which JavaScript, which rendering is taking time. Which elements is not here. For example, I can say, show me my content. These are the images. How many of them are non-cache? How many are non-cache? How many are short-lived? I get this information. Helps me understand whether my browser will perform well in a real scenario, in a production environment or not. And when I talked about, when I talked about doing end-to-end, you want to know this also because in this particular case, for example, I have this particular web page, I downloaded, I made 54 requests in this part to go to this web server and come back. So if this is my production environment is 54, every time I have to go to this page, it is making 54 calls to the web server. Is it an optimized code or can I optimize it for my use or not? Sorry, go ahead.
So are all the raw performance data sitting on the Dynatrace servers?
It is sitting on the Dynatrace server. Dynatrace, you have two choices. By default, Dynatrace captures all the data and puts into a file. And you can say, show me the load test that I did from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. last Monday, and Dynatrace will pull it for you. Other option that customers do, especially in the load testing environment, they said, I don't want it to record automatically. I want to start recording and stop recording on my own, so that I get files like these, like the one that I built here, load test 1, load test 2. So you have full control over whether you want a separate file or do you want Dynatrace to do it for you, up to you.
So essentially, you don't, if in case there are sensitive data, you have the choice not to send this data to your servers.
So by default, we do not capture sensitive data. We are capturing your web request, we are capturing your query strings.
Well, I mean, in case it's in a production environment, just user input could be sensitive information.
Yeah, but we do not capture, we are capturing methods, but we are not necessarily capturing the arguments of the method by default. You have to say, I want to capture the argument of the method, which may have a credit card number in it, or social security number in it. You have to say that I want to capture the request header parameters, session attributes. We do not do it by default. So in production environment, you really need to lock it down. And based upon your permission, you can turn it on or not on. A lot of e-commerce site will not put us in production at all if we were showing them all the information because there's a lot of sensitive data. But some data you may want to capture. Who is buying or which is my most popular product? It's not sensitive, this is more for your business you use and you want to capture that. So you then control it. Yes?
Out of curiosity, or what if a use case, I had a production environment and I didn't want to capture the data because I didn't expect it to be that critical, but on the off chance it is, do you guys ever have any type of compliance restrictions on your side so that you can secure, store customer data securely? Or?
No, well, so if you're capturing sensitive data, right, and if you as a customer are saying that's fine with me, but I want that data to be visible to these 5 people but nobody else. We mask that data for the rest of the people, and only when you log into that server, based upon your permission, you get to either see it or the data is masked for you.
I guess the point also is that if the servers are hosted on-prem, they will be within your physical control. So it's not like it's hosted in the cloud or a SaaS type environment. So that perspective, compliance perspective, that also would depend on that.
But from the compliance perspective, the other thing that we are seeing customers saying, even though you mask it, we don't want anything to be written to the file at all. And that's coming back to your question is, you don't turn it on at all. You don't turn on capturing the arguments or capturing the header values. Because we have to write it to the file because you have turned it on. It's all in your control whether you want to turn it on or not. If you turn it on, it goes to the file, we'll mask it for you, but then you are really not a PCI compliant because it says that you should not even write to a file. Even though it is in our own format, it's still not compliant. But the beauty is you have full control about whether you want to capture it or not.
So you're saying out of the box, it is PCI compliant,
yes.
But you can make it not compliant.
Exactly.
Okay.
Absolutely.
In your experience, customers saw this benefit, obviously. They're like, yeah, this is great. And as seen in this demo, what barriers have you seen for customers to realize this benefit when they try it out?
What barrier? When you say barriers, you're saying?
Like, you'll have customers that say, you know what, it looked great on the demo, but I tried it out and I don't realize what you saw in the demo. And maybe there's a trend for those customers that, either their type of application or what they were trying to look at, it didn't work for them. Is there like a commonality or something that you've seen?
No, actually, really not. I have not seen, because what we generally do is of course, I'm showing you a demo, but before you buy, we do a proof of concept in your environment, you get to see your data. And the customers who are looking at any tools like these are really, there's a reason for them because they are, there's a performance problem, they do not have insight into the application. So I personally don't have any trend or any customer saying, yeah, it's good, but I don't need it.
It's also quick, right? And you're going to test it beforehand. So you'll run a load test in your environment with problem before you.
Well, yeah, it's just I was seeing before I try it out. It's kind of like, well, it doesn't really work this well for this kind of thing. We've seen customers do a proof of concept and it's failed because of this kind of thing. We're working on it because we've seen that trend. But
typically, the only thing is somebody with like a really ancient version of Java that's no longer supported, but we'll figure that out before we start. And it's very hard.
Like one of the few things that we see is that customers have a .NET application, but that's making a call to VB6 or non-managed code. But then when we say, okay, it's VB6, we provide what we call a native ADK, and then we instrument the VB6 also. So it's like, oh, first when we engage with them, they said it's all .NET. When we put that, we realize, oh, it's not .NET, it's calling .NET and a VB6, for example. Then we engage with them saying, let's instrument your VB6 also, and then they get to see end-to-end. But very rarely, even that. And as like Tim was saying, if they're using older version of Java or older version of .NET, then it's, but we get to know that even before that because as we engage with prospects, we check with them, we have a good dialogue with them because our intention is to show them the value of the tool and we want to know for our consumption as well as for their consumption that if you have the right kind of technology, it will work. If you don't, let's figure out as early as possible so that we do not waste the prospect time. Yes?
So this looks like getting most of the data based on the time that we are spending on a particular process, or a particular method. But does it give us insight based on like how system is performing in terms of like CPU, memory?
Yeah, so it does. And I can launch my demo app. What that does is when you put this agent, if I go back to this on, if I go back to this particular slide and go back here, for example, yeah, this one. Here we are automatically showing you how your transaction is flowing out of the box. But as you put agents into your Java, .NET or different tier, that is not only shows you the method information, it also brings automatically the host information, CPU, memory, network, disk space and all that automatically out of the box. So I didn't kind of include that in this diagram, but again, looking at the demo, live demo right now, if I just go back and clear my environment, you can say, see this is my demo that is running right now. Bring my cursor over here, show me the host health. And here I get my machine, which is my laptop, my CPU, my memory. These are the different applications that are running in my machine right now. Network and disk space on that machine automatically. And then I can say, okay, so these are my Java layer, that is application that is running. I click on it. Instantly, I just started my application, but I get my garbage collection information, my if it's Java, it's Eden space, survivor space, that kind of heap space. Is with .NET, I again get the heap space information. So I can go, as you said correctly, we capture that, because if a transaction is taking time, if your performance is bad, is it application or is it host? You get with one view, you get that information here. Everything is looking green, that means my application is maybe falling. Yeah.
I didn't see that. Maybe I missed disk activity, like blocks in, blocks out.
We are like the I/O, what kind of read and write I'm doing, right? Is that?
I really want to check, is my disk caching working properly? Or
because there are so many, basically to get this data, we are making a native call to the operating system to get this information for Windows, for Linux, Unix and all that. When it comes to disk I/O and then whether my disk caching is working, that's very specific to the vendor. Like it could be EMC disk storage that you're using or some other one, and if that data is very vendor specific. So out of the box, we do not bring that data, but as I mentioned, we have a plugin infrastructure where you can use the vendor's API and bring that data into database and see whether your disk I/O as well as the disk caching, what's the cache hit ratio of the disk and all that, you can get that information, pull that information, but you have to a little bit extend database to get that information.
And do you provide those extensions or do we write them ourselves?
So we do kind of both, in the sense that we have a lot of customers using WebSphere MQ, for example. So something that we have written internally also, and then that is available to you for free. You can download it and install it. If it's very, very specific, if you can write it, you can write it because the API is very standard API. As long as you can write in Java, it will work. If you write it, you can consume it and you can share with us. Or once in a while, we get engaged with the customer saying, okay, you're trying to do something, we do half and half kind of thing. So it's kind of depends upon scenario to scenario.
Okay. The one other element that maybe you mentioned and I missed again, these layers are often connected by networks.
Yes.
What do you tell us about what's happening on the connection, the bandwidth, the latency, the time it takes?
So you're talking about so a couple of ways to say that. Let me see if I can show you what we are. So this is my demo app. Now the web server is showing up right now. I can give you information because I know there's an agent here, there's an agent here. I can tell you how much time is spent in the inter-tier. I can also, so I can say when so many calls were made between these tiers and the time spent here is 0.36 milliseconds. So I can tell you the inter-tier time between different layers.
Does that assume that the clocks on the two layers are exactly aligned? Or?
No, we do that automatically for you. Because not only that, the clock here and there could be totally different regions of the world, right? But we do that automatically for you. So I can show you what the time spent between the tier and whether the network is an issue or not. Whether the network has a lot of collisions or not, in this tool I cannot. If there is packet collision happening, we have other tools that provide you that information, absolutely. This one is more on the application layer.
Okay.
Yes?
Can you, with that peer review, tell like, okay, if I have, say, 10,000 transactions, can I get a sense of how many of those transactions were actually interrupted due to some network glitch?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely I can, because if my Java layer, suppose this JVM is not able to make a web request web service call here, I'll get an exception. I can, as I mentioned, we capture all the exception. So I can tell you what kind of exceptions were thrown. Okay, this is a network or is unable to reach the destination or the host. I can see how many transactions were like this and what exactly I can absolutely be able to tell you that.
How about files? Like if I'm getting remote files, is it also, if I have a file server, I can also have that, how long it took to grab that file?
Yes, because your code or the JVM code or the whatever software that you're using, third-party vendor software to get the I/O, Java I/O and .NET I/O, the method will do a socket read to read the file, and we'll tell you, yeah, just to read that file took 3 seconds. We absolutely will tell you that. Because your thread is then blocked till the data is read, and we can capture that. We do. Same thing for the databases, even though they are kind of different protocols to talk to database as well as to file, but the concept is the same. And if you try to read in a file, the file is not found or file is corrupted, exception is thrown, we can show you, we capture the exception and tie it to a particular transaction. So for example, I'm running the demo right now, and I can say for this demo, show me all the exceptions so far. Here are my exceptions with these values. So here I can say not supported, for example, or I can go in XML, just picking up any exception, show me the transaction that threw it. And this is the one. Not only do I show you which transaction threw that exception, that is automatically will take you there where the exception is thrown. And these are the ones. So one transaction is throwing 5 of these same exception, exact location of the exception.
All right, let's thank Asad.
Yeah, thank you.